Hello, this is Dr. Trevor Miller and Nurse Jessica. And today for the 7 o'clock talk, we have on Kelly Ryerson. And if you follow health on Instagram or Facebook and you've come across anything related to glyphosate, she is also known as the glyphosate girl. And I have several questions here, Kelly, and I really haven't done your background very good there. I didn't do a good intro for everything that you do. So, as I get ready to jump into a question here, real quick, what inspired you to start Glyphosate Facts, and how did your personal health journey shape and focus your how did you discover basically glyphosate and what it's doing to both our health and environment?
Yeah, so it was not something that I ever saw coming, really. I was like probably many of your patients, in which I had just a ton of symptoms that weren't really connected to a specific condition. It happened after I had my second and final child, and I was getting things like rashes, really bad stomach issues, hair loss, exhaustion, anxiety, just my body eyesight issues. Like my body was really starting to shut down, and it wasn't light, like it was incapacitating. And I saw 20 different doctors around basically the Stanford hospital system, including neurologists and endocrinologists and just the gamut of people. And none of them really had an answer for me except medications for trying to treat inflammation of some kind that they weren't really able to detect. And because I likely imagining my symptoms, right? And so I was put on 2 different antidepressants and benzodiazepine and then gabapentin and then steroids for sinus issues. I mean, it was out of control. And of course, all those things have side effects. And so finally I thought, well, maybe I am crazy because this was going on. And I went to see a psychiatrist who had intake blood work, and it wasn't a functional psychiatrist, it was just a psychiatrist. And it came back, and he had some measurements of vitamins on it. It's the first time anyone thought to test my vitamins. And I mean, I had 0 vitamin C, explaining the rashes. I had just like 0 D. I had hardly any magnesium. I had hardly any folate. Like all of these key things for biology just weren't there. And I was like, well, I wonder if that has something to do with it. I went back to my GP and I said, well, I realized that I have none of these vitamins. And she said, oh, well, that won't be causing any of those symptoms. So, I mean, this was a Harvard trained doctor that I had. And which now I'm like, of course, she thought that couldn't be me causing any symptoms. And so I then saw a new doctor who said, I think you should try going gluten-free. I went gluten-free, started putting all the vitamins back in my body, started eating organically, and got so much better and was able to heal and taper off the medications. And so around that time, Columbia University was having their big celiac and gluten. Every 2 years they have a conference. It's a pretty preeminent institution there, the Celiac Center. And so I went to find out why basically I had gluten sensitivity to this level. And the scientists were talking about, oh, what could it be, that's causing this inflammation? It's very real. Like people get inflammatory markers in their blood when they're having gluten, even if they don't have celiac disease. And so one of the scientists said, well, maybe it's something other than the gluten itself. And so I go over to the microphone. I'm like, well, what do they do on the farm? Is anything sprayed on it? And no one said anything. They're like, well, we don't know. Okay. So I went and sat down, and then someone from General Mills was there to sell and describe how they isolate oats so that they can be gluten-free for the gluten-free Cheerios. And he came and he found me. He said, yeah, right before harvest, they spray Roundup and all over the field. And so that ends up in residues on the food. And so I was like, well, that doesn't sound good. I didn't know much. I was like, that doesn't sound good. And he said, and I was like, well, can't you ask them not to do that? And he said it would take 2 years or 2 decades to change the practices. And so I came back, I started trying to contact these scientists who had been speaking out about glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup. And so I go on Google, I'm like, what does this person say? Like Dr. Stephanie Seneff. And then there'd be all of these articles about why she's a quack, right? For criticizing glyphosate. And then I would look at these other people and they're like, well, he isn't a real scientist or whatever it is. And so I'm like, oh, well, maybe there's nothing here. But I went and actually met with Dr. Stephanie Seneff, and she told me all about these shenanigans that Monsanto and Big Ag plays to keep this product on the market. And then around that time, the glyphosate cancer litigation was beginning in San Francisco. And I actually usually live very close in there. And so I was like, well, I'm going to go over to the trial and see what's going on. This is very interesting. It's the first time Monsanto's ever been put in front of a jury. And so I went up there. I actually had a protest sign against Monsanto, like with me, because I assumed because of San Francisco, there'd be some big protest against Monsanto. Oh no, I walked right into the courtroom and sat right down next to RFK Jr., who was the litigator, one of the litigators against Monsanto. And I noticed that no one was really covering it. So I quit my job at the time doing some health coaching in Palo Alto. And I was like, I'm going to dedicate myself to telling the truth about what's happening in this courtroom, because the media was certainly going to spin anything that happened. So I started this like on the fly blog called Glyphosate Girl. And I talked about, and I started out as anonymous, but it was very clear very quickly that Monsanto knew exactly who I was. And began there. So that was the origin.
That's it. Because I've seen, as I was doing research on this and for this interview, I have seen that you've taken some shots from them as well.
Oh my gosh. There's nothing really to prepare you for that, because you're like, really, you're coming after me, And then in the internal documents that were revealed during the trial, actually, there is a program that the lawyers unveiled that's called the Let Nothing Go campaign. And this is a campaign paid for by Monsanto to make sure that, and I don't see it as much now, maybe because so many more people are talking about glyphosate finally, but at that time, a few years ago, there weren't. And so like anytime I post anything, you would have like 5 trolls saying you're an idiot.
And I will unite the trolls under one.
Because they had people like literally ready there to counter and let nothing go online.
3, 4. You're trying my patience. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Wow. And that's a straight playbook from like cigarette companies, from Big Ag, Big Food. It's
the same really
weird. And this will be in another question, a follow-up question, but you guys seem to have this ability to find the research. How do you find that? Because a lot of people, like here, we're in Indiana, so I know the name Integrated Health of Indiana might have given you a hint, but I have had discussions with patients who are farmers, and they're all super big-hearted. They're great people, and they have honestly told me it's just salt water. Huh. And I'm like, no, it's not.
Shut up, it is not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
But where do I find research to basically have and give my farmers?
Well, that is so interesting, because I spent a lot of time in Iowa and Southern Illinois, where there's a lot of the farmers that are doing the GMO crops, and so they spray a lot of different chemicals. And I was working on a documentary project actually, and would meet with them, and I was, first of all, never saying I was primarily from California, because that would be a no-go. and then second, I would say, well, are you worried about the fact that the International Agency for Research on Cancer has connected glyphosate with cancer? And there was no one that I would talk to that was willing to like mentally put their mind there. And to the point that several of the farmers said, well, our families had cancer because it's not because of glyphosate, because like, it's very inconvenient too. And I actually have tons and tons of compassion for the farmers. And it's such a huge problem because they are entirely dependent on this chemical to be able to make a profit now. So it's not like they could just shut that off immediately, because they would lose their farm. So it's a difficult situation. And one of the things that I'm really working on now is because, first I'm fighting glyphosate, and I'm like, okay, this problem is so large and it has to be supportive of farmers. And so now I founded a group called American Regeneration. And what we're doing is bringing these amazing regenerative farmers to the table so that they can explain how they were able to decrease inputs, but while increasing profits, right? Because it has to be profit centric. So, I just think that I mean, I can imagine being the farmers and saying, well, and thinking to myself, maybe not even consciously, I don't have a choice. I have to spray this stuff. The EPA said that it's fine. I'm willing to trust them, and that's just the way it is. And it's just heartbreaking. And back to your question about where I find this research. So my first stop was actually in the courtroom, because so many scientists came in as expert witnesses, and they were able to point me in routes. And a lot of them had done the research on glyphosate and had published peer-reviewed papers on it. And so I got started that way, learned all about meta-analyses, learned all about like these different types of toxicology, and then but really the thing that anyone can do with any subject whatsoever to really get a sense of where the research is on anything medical is to go to PubMed. And there's a great search bar, and you go in there and you can say something like glyphosate infertility, glyphosate cancer, or like whatever it is, atrazine, infertility, all these different pesticides. And then you'll see all of the things that were written by scientists globally on these subjects. Now, some research that's in there was paid for by industry. So you have to always look and see, okay, well, who funded this study? Because there's a lot of funding that goes to protect the chemicals as well. And those oftentimes are faulty.
Yeah, and they've seen, I think the correlation is 85 to 90% correlation for the industry funded studies towards the industry. But we've seen tons of cancers. Like when you worked in Schneck, you saw tons of cancers over there, didn't you?
They'd actually built their town on top of a abandoned chemical company that they had just taken and lined a big pit, put the barrels in there, put another liner on top, and they covered it with dirt and built a city on top of it.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh.
And see, we're downstream from like Indianapolis and the big farmers there. So we see lots of weird cancers, lymphocytic cancers. We haven't drank tap water here in ever. It's all reverse osmosis. I was like, this crazy stuff. So
is that like the first thing you tell your patients? Go and get a water filter?
Honestly, I have the one that Dr. Hyman has out front, the AquaTrue. I have that out there for patients to sample and show that you don't have to spend thousands of dollars to drink clean water.
But a lot of them think that they can go get bottled water and that's just as good, not even thinking about the bottle itself. And so like you have no idea where that bottle has been, where it's been sitting, if it's been in the sun, if it's been like get glass and put it in there. But I think that's the last thing our patients think of is their water, because they think that they just innately just think that people are going to protect them.
Yeah. They want government to protect them, and that doesn't happen because government is driven by money, and he who has the dollar speaks. So
trust in me. I'm from the government, and I'm here to help.
Anyway, sorry, I get going down a different rabbit hole. And so my next question is, you've described discovering glyphosate's role in chronic disease as a rabbit hole. Can you share a pivotal moment, other than like walking into the San Francisco courtroom and sitting down next to RFK, which we love RFK, and a pivotal moment or piece of evidence that solidified your mission to raise awareness about this herbicide and class of herbicides?
Mm-hmm. The big thing for me, because I was really able to trace my own chronic illness to leaky gut.
This is a full schematic of a healthy intestine. A healthy intestine should include abundant keystone bacteria, limited pathogens or potentially harmful strains, and strong physical barriers. A healthy gut microbiome should have a high abundance of beneficial bacteria that can limit the overgrowth of unwanted pathogens. These beneficial microbes help protect the integrity of the intestinal barrier by producing short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. Butyrate and other metabolites help maintain a strong mucosal barrier that helps shield the intestinal cell lines from damaging toxins and pathogens. Additionally, butyrate can reduce intestinal inflammation and improve barrier function by maintaining the tight junctions that hold intestinal cells together. A disruption in this ecology, where beneficial microbes become outnumbered by potentially harmful bacteria, is called dysbiosis. Dysbiosis is driven by these main factors. As the microbial population becomes unbalanced, unwanted pathogens begin to degrade the mucosal barrier. If the mucosal barrier is not intact, toxins can migrate towards the intestinal cells, inflicting damage and creating inflammation. As tight junctions loosen and break apart, this creates gaps in the intestinal lining that allow toxins to enter circulation. This migration of toxins from the intestines into circulation is called leaky gut. Leaky gut is a self-perpetuating problem, affecting at least 50% of healthy Americans, as it can trigger chronic inflammation throughout the entire body. This inflammatory cascade starts with a toxin produced within the gut itself called lipopolysaccharide, or LPS. Circulating LPS gets bound by a transfer protein called LPS binding protein, or LBP. LBP carries LPS to the CD14 toll-like receptor complexes on the immune cells, like macrophages and dendritic cells, which then activates the NF-kappa B inflammatory cascade. The activation of NF-kappa B increases the production of pro-inflammatory mediators, like TNF-alpha, interleukin-1 beta, interleukin-6, and MCP-1. This is the same exact sequence that occurs in sepsis, also known as blood poisoning or septicemia. Immune cells that become activated by LPS and release pro-inflammatory cytokines exist in all parts of the body and are capable of crossing the blood-brain barrier. Therefore, the inflammatory response can occur throughout the body, including the brain, fat stores, nerves, joints, and more. This type of inflammation is a breeding ground for a variety of chronic illnesses. Reversing the dysbiosis and the damage to the intestinal barrier is paramount to health and wellness.
So when I started digging in, and actually one of the lawyers in particular who I met, he actually is a big, we would talk for hours about the microbiome. And he actually was part of the next lawsuit that was based for consumers to get Monsanto to take off the label that it didn't impact humans, that glyphosate wouldn't impact humans, because that's what they had forever until a couple of years ago. And they were able to prove that the microbiome is so impacted, and that is part of the human body system. So Monsanto had to take that label off. And one of the, and so there's this big body of research, which once again, you can go and find, particularly by Dr. Robin Menage. He is a French a microbiologist who has done a lot of study. And I actually went over to London because he was working out at King's College there to see his lab and meet with him and understand the specific impacts that glyphosate is having on our beneficial gut bacteria. And it's actually registered as an anti-parasitic. And so it has kind of these antimicrobial effects. And when I realized in reading this research that it selects for the beneficial gut bacteria, but allows the negative bacteria to proliferate, it's like, what kind of weird antibiotic is this, that this is just killing off the really beneficial stuff here? This is crazy. And the way that it does so is through something called the shlkimate pathway. The shlkimate pathway in the bacteria basically shutting off the energy source to the bacteria. And that impacts downstream things like serotonin. So we depend on that beneficial gut bacteria for a lot of things, including your serotonin levels. And you start to then think, oh, wow, let's think of all the people on SSRIs, all the people that are depressed. And then going a step further, understanding that there is a connection between glyphosate and the tight junctions in the intestine that actually haven't been widely published yet. This is something I'm really hoping that the scientist gets funding for, because he was able to see that glyphosate contributes to holding open the tight junctions longer than they should be. And so meaning that more toxins leave the gut and go out into the bloodstream, contributing to that autoimmunity and inflammation. So it was really gut-based. And then to like put a cherry on top, the chief toxicologist over at Monsanto, and now Bayer, she's still there as like a fellow. There was a recording of her deposition, and they were saying, can you say that, or why haven't you done a long-term study on Roundup on rats? Like, there's never been a long-term study that the EPA has required or anything using the formulated Roundup product, which is what we're all exposed to, on animals. Like, it just hasn't happened. It hasn't been asked. Like, and he knew. He's like, why haven't you done that? Well, the reason why is because she described, the gut lining of the rats is so fragile that we couldn't do a carcinogenicity study because it wrecked the intestines before we could even get that data as to whether or not it's a carcinogen. And I'm like, hold up, like, what are you saying here? You're saying you can't do a study. And what are we? That's what's happening to all of us. That's why our gut is destroyed. I mean, it's one of the reasons. There are a lot of insults, but it's a big one. It's the most used pesticide of all time. It's an everything.
Worried about rats, but they're not worried about people.
Yeah, we can't do the study because we make them too sick too fast.
Yeah.
I can't wrap my head around this. I can't wrap my head around this entire thing.
You're talking to the most empathetic advocate for the patient. She is possibly the most passionate person I know that is an advocate. Like, if you ever have something that you want an absolute bloodhound on, there's your girl.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
I'm just going to ask because this just seems like a no-brainer to me. I mean, I've run down all your rabbit holes, and I run down all the rabbit holes, like not even just glyphosate, but the appeal. And all the little things were coming out, and I'm like, oh, RFK, where are you? Like, why is this happening? And I get you're very passionate about glyphosate because there's so many that you could pick. Where are we going as a country? Like, our community is dying from any one of these chemicals. I know we're talking about glyphosate.
Oh, no, it could be paraquat. It could be actually diquat.
With all of the information, and then vote it down.
And I am working somewhat. I mean, I'm not working for the government, but I'm in touch with the people in HHS. And, I think that like it's a moment of frustration for sure, particularly on the pesticide front, because, and that's part of why this liability shield is going, they're trying to pass a liability shield so you can't sue pesticide manufacturers right now, because the momentum of people like you and what you're saying is getting to be too loud that it's starting to scare the farmers and the pesticide companies for sure. And it's interesting because actually Callie Means was talking about how, he's been dealing straight up with the pharmaceutical lobbies, with big food. And he's like, nothing prepared me for big ag. Like, and the difference is that with pharma and with big food, you're just dealing with the corporations, but with this, you're dealing with the corporation, but then also like the mass majority of farmers, right? That use food. And so it's so much bigger.
We live in the Midwest, so all of our neighbors are farmers. Mm-hmm. But as a nurse, going through COVID and being enlightened, if you will, by what we were doing to try to save people, but we were actually killing them. Mm-hmm. Like, I morally could not trade my time for a paycheck anymore. I don't know, as a farmer, knowing the information that I know, I could not put my tractor in that field with those chemicals behind me, even though I knew I had a mortgage to pay and a family to feed, knowing that I was harming people. Like, I can't wrap my head around this.
Yeah, but
I cannot wrap my head around this.
In defense of the farmer, they have so much marketing and they have the scientists coming to them, because I try to put my feet in their shoes. They get hammered by these so-called scientists with Monsanto's backed research that says this stuff is safe. And, they've never heard of the shlkimate pathway. They don't know that it disrupts the aromatic amino acids that we produce. And so when they're coming in here and they're depressed and they know we do functional medicine and we're starting to address this with them, it just blows their mind.
Mm-hmm.
But you're involved in it. So, I mean, everybody's talking about it. I don't know that it's kind of like cigarette smoking. Like everybody in this world knows that cigarettes are bad for them. So if you put a cigarette in your mouth, you are very well aware of the risk. How
do we help get that out?
How can we help you? One, and two, what are you seeing? What are they doing about it?
Well, just for reference, I've gone several times now to the Office of Pesticide Programs at the EPA with scientists to testify on the things that it's actually doing. And I brought atrazine as well, because the fact that atrazine is found in our drinking water is just obscene. The endocrine disruption is obscene. And, now we're below replacement rate in reproduction in this country. And, I'm looking, I'm like, well, I know why. All my friends who are infertile, it's horrible. And what I was hopeful about with this, so under the Biden administration, forget it, the door was shut. Like, they're not going to talk about pesticides. In fact, I even went with a group that was presenting information on the toxicity of baby formula and how they found all these heavy metals in it. And the head of human foods for the FDA said, forget it. Like, I'm not doing anything about it. Like, it's so bad. It's so unethical. And so then, with the hope of the MAHA movement, and we didn't really know what to think about Lee Zeldin, who is now the administrator of the EPA. And obviously we know where Bobby stands. And what was heartbreaking is that right after the MAHA Commission report came out, that, by the way, I actually had submitted a lot to it. And the fact that they even got the word glyphosate and atrazine into that report was monumental, because the pushback even to not mention any pesticides at all in that report was so extreme that was the most that they could say that they would sign off on. And I'm pretty sure that Bobby went to the mat for those two even mentions. And so what does the EPA do in response? But not really the EPA. What does the industry do in response? They just put someone in right under Lee Zeldin to oversee pesticides. That's the star lobbyist from the Soybean Association. So atrazine and glyphosate are coming up next year for re-registration, which will last 15 years. And so they are making sure that they're in line so that they will still say the science is set. And, there's a scientist who's fabulous at Berkeley, and she's a toxicologist, and she was called in 2016 because when the IARC came out and said, hey, we think this is a probable human carcinogen, the EPA was flagged to do a new reassessment. And so what they do is they bring in these toxicologists from around the country who they consider to not have conflicts of interest. And I mean, I'm sure that's not always successful, but anyway, they try not to have conflicts of interest. And so she was one of them. So she was brought in to come to the EPA and look with a team. They were actually from UW also, looked at the epidemiology of glyphosate. And she saw that there's a 40% increase in the likelihood of developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma if you're exposed to glyphosate. This is what the research said. She turned it into the EPA, she and her team, and then they sat back like, okay, good, now we have more clarity. The EPA comes out shortly after there and said there's no evidence of harm to human health from exposure to glyphosate. And so she published that report with all of her colleagues, and she was just outraged. She's like, what are you guys doing? So in other words, I think despite this momentum that we have, I have full faith in HHS. I don't have full faith in everyone that's trying to surround it and smother it right now. So what I'm trying to do is think, okay, put myself, because it makes me feel like giving up, frankly. But
what? You may want to go get a big stick and find people.
I I'm about to whip somebody.
It gives me anxiety. I mean, honestly, when I walk outside and I can smell the chemicals in the air, it shoots my anxiety up because I'm like, I'm drinking poison and everything around me is got poison on it. And I'm like, and nobody's doing anything about it.
And I'll be very honest, I never tested for glyphosate in my patients until recently. Once I went down the rabbit hole, your information and the 500,000 podcasts that you've done, and then listening to the others, and I was just like, I really don't want to go down this hole, but I've got to because it's just too important. And we've totally gone off the rails of questions on my little outline. That's gone. But,
well, because and you probably heard this in my other podcast, because I got really, I'm very concerned about infertility. I think it's tightly tied to Rachel Carson's prediction in Silent Spring that we're all dying, just like the pollinators. And so I sent semen samples from a few different guys over to the lab. All of them came back positive for glyphosate. The studies show that glyphosate kills or makes immobile sperm. And you think, okay, well, that's a really big thing, right? And then I thought, I wonder, my daughter lost her baby tooth. And I thought, well, I know it crosses the placenta. I wonder if it's in there. She would have formed that in utero, sent it into the lab, positive for glyphosate. And I'm like,
question for you. So the men's sperm that you sent in, were they people that lived in agriculture areas, or were they people that did not and it trickled down to them?
They did not, and it trickled down through diet.
So the people that are living in those areas, born and raised, I'm sure they are just teeming with glyphosate.
Well, they definitely are. In fact, there was a study of French farmers, and they spray way less than we do. And they had infertility, and they came back with high levels of it in their semen.
God. So hold on, just as a doctor for the treatment aspect, we actually do the IFM's elimination diet, which is, hey, be totally organic. You eliminate the big 5 crops. We do use glutathione. We do use methylated B vitamins, because we do see where people just come back tanked on all their nutrients. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you have seen? Because in the beginning, I did not explain that you are also a health coach. You mentioned it in passing, but you actually deal with this hands-on, even though you're not a quote unquote doctor. You have hands-on experience with this. What do you use to help your people that have glyphosate poisoning?
Yeah. But the main thing, like you're saying, is you have to shut off the faucet. And that is really the first and biggest thing. So where are you being exposed? I start with the water filter. So I start with the water filter, and we go through the food choices. And are you using sanitary products like tampons that the cotton would have glyphosate in it? That's a really big one for women, the absorption through the vaginal canal. And
that's not sensitive at all.
Yes, no, nothing porous about that. Mm-hmm. And then, and just the things that you're saying, it's not like there's nothing you can take to really make it go away, because it's taken up into your tissues. So it's the same kind of thing of, glutathione, supporting detox pathways, sauna, all drinking plenty of water. The thing is that it does bioaccumulate. And one of the reasons why it's so tightly connected to blood cancers is because when the body takes it up, it ends up in the bone, at least for a period of time. And it makes its way through the bone. And then, so even if you stopped eating it today, let's say anything with glyphosate, no exposure, you're still going to be urinating it out for some time, because it's a slow leach out of the bone tissue. And what's crazy is that glyphosate binds to minerals. So it can hold up and bind to minerals in your body, making them unavailable. And so you get them in with the calcium too in the bone. And it's really it's a sticky situation where it doesn't want to let go.
It takes 7 years to turn over all the atoms in the body. So
yeah, but that's only if you're never exposed again. But that's never going to happen, because they just keep bombarding. And if you're saying that men that don't even live in an area where there's agriculture and they have glyphosate in their semen, that's coming directly from the water in their fruit, vegetables, grains, whatever they're using it on. And is that even going to be a reality that we could just shut it off?
I haven't actually tested. I would think that, I went for a time of being really strict, and then truthfully, like my social life really took a hit, because if you don't go out and eat, that has an impact also on your mental health and then your human health, your body health. And so I've had to be like kind of balanced. But then on the other hand, I stopped testing my urine because I know what it's probably saying.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Right. It's really high, but it isn't as high as some people, but it certainly, isn't great. But I agree with you. No, it's just, there's no escaping it. And a lot of even organic things have, it's better, but they can oftentimes be positive for glyphosate because it's in the irrigation, or a lot of the organic fertilizers are manure. And so the places that they source the manure are like CAFOs or feedlots where the cows have been fed GMO crops, and so they're laden with glyphosate. The main route of excretion is through feces, and so that's just filled with all the junk, and then it's put on as fertilizer, then taken up into the crops in the organic fields too.
Jeez. So how much do you think? So let's just a couple things real. Glyphosate is bad. If you're eating if you're eating corn, soy, wheat, oats, and what's that?
Beans. Is a big.
So if you're eating those things, you are getting exposed, and it's bad. You've got to figure out ways to get away from this. But the other thing that happens, and if we stop doing that second application right before harvest, how much impact do you think that has?
Oh my gosh, that's what I'm working on day and night right now, is to try and figure out how do we make this a feasible proposal policy-wise. This is something that it only would, the chemical companies shouldn't screen, because it's only about 3% of the total chemicals are used in that practice at most. Yet it accounts for at least 90% of our dietary exposure, is just that pre-harvest spray.
Because prior to, I can't remember the year that they started doing that, but prior to that, the years before that, you didn't see the gluten sensitivities, the celiac, all of those things.
No.
It just exploded.
Well, it augments, because if you're already ripping down the tight junctions, and now you throw in zonulin, which rips down tight junctions, you've taken a small hole and made it a gaping wound. And so that's a big problem. But yeah, in 06, they started, I think 05 or 06 is when that became a big practice. So how close, and I know like Gabe Brown and some of the regenerative farmers are starting to have enough data points to point to, hey, the myth that we have to feed the world, and the only way to feed the world through chemicals, is starting to have huge holes poked through it. How close are we to actually having enough data points to just sit here and say that claim is overtly false, just like the claim that, the Got Milk ads?
Yeah, but do we really feed the world? Because a lot of countries don't import our stuff. So
they don't want it.
Yeah, they don't want it. We don't want it.
We don't want it. They don't want it. And Brooke Rollins is going around, she's head of the USDA now. She's going around trying to force people to buy our toxins. And those countries look at us, they're like, we don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah, we were just trying to force Mexico, weren't we? And they're like, yeah, we don't want it.
Yeah. And so we started threatening them. We're doing the same thing in Europe. We're threatening them.
We shouldn't want to give it to them. We shouldn't want to give it to them, and we shouldn't want our people to eat it here either.
Oh, no.
We understand that.
And that's where I'm like, it has nothing to do with human and their health. It has to be following a dollar bill somewhere, because it has nothing to do with true health.
Well, so that's the argument that I'm really working on with my team and actually with Rick Clark, who's an amazing organic regenerative farmer, Gabe Brown, I work with all those farmers. And And we are putting together exactly the economic argument so that it is in place for not only farmers, but also for policymakers to understand exactly what you're talking about. It doesn't have to be like this. This is the proof that it doesn't have to be like this. And by the way, I don't know what world and exploding population they're talking about, because we're below replacement rate.
Yeah.
And so, that's really inconvenient to their narrative.
Well, and if you've run down that rabbit hole, we are actually high compared to other people, and we are below replacing ourselves.
Yeah. I was actually stunned that we were on the higher end, because we're just the most polluted of them all. So that was kind of surprising. It must be our medicine's better. I don't know.
Kelly, I wanted to follow up with on the agriculture and policy stuff. I know we started to get into the weeds on the last one, but the introduction of Roundup Ready GMOs was done in '96, and this led to a surge in glyphosate use. What are the long-term consequences of this shift for farmers and actually for our soil health?
Yeah, it was just, as I was talking about, this launch of GMOs just completely changed the landscape of our heartland. And what's remarkable is originally they were made to be resistant to the effects of Roundup. That's what they were developed for, so that farmers could come in and spray as much glyphosate as they wanted across their field, and it wouldn't impact their cash crops, so their corn or their soy. And what's amazing now is that there's so much weed resistance to glyphosate because it's been so used that nature has outmaneuvered. And so just recently, a new GMO was launched, and it is actually resistant to 5 different pesticides, because this is a new cycle that is insurmountable, because going down this route of just continually adding more and more and more toxicity is something that nature isn't appreciating. And so you have this situation now where the soil is so lacking in its in the microbial organic matter that is so vital to its structure and to even being able to grow food and to even retain moisture. And so you see a lot of these floods that are happening all across the heartland, and it regularly is taking out large amounts of our topsoil. So that is terrible on many fronts, not only for the farmer and their ability to grow food, but also just thinking of national security, because we're now in a situation where some people say it's 30, some people say it's 50 harvests that we have left, because our soil is so decimated from all this chemical contamination.
Well, I think that Purdue University, I think, actually did a study on this, and they did a side-by-side, and they dumped water in the dirt that had been glyphosated, and then they had dumped water in a regenerative section, and the water on the dirt side, the glyphosate side, just looked like it was pouring through a sieve. And then the other side held it. And I forget, do you happen to know how much water the soil holds if it's not been damaged that way?
I don't know the quantity of number. I do know that if any of your listeners ever have a chance to go to a regenerative field day, this is one of the things that they show, or these water tests. And it's just remarkable, because the water is able to take up, the soil when it's healthy is able to retain all this moisture, and much less susceptible than to severe drought, because the soil is still holding onto this moisture to provide to whatever is growing. And and you're right. And what happens with the decimated is it just sits on top. It isn't absorbed rapidly into the soil like it is in a healthy soil system. And so that's where you get these massive runoffs and floods.
Huh. That's just crazy. Well, I know you follow a lot of the court cases, and you've been in on several of them, challenging Monsanto's claims about Roundup's safety. What are the most significant developments in these cases, and how are they going to influence future regulation? I mean, there's a political aspect of that.
Yeah, there definitely is. This is really what I'm working on night and day right now, is this escalation of what started with just a cancer case in San Francisco in 2018 is now is now so enormous. So you have a situation where Bayer stands to be bankrupted from all of these lawsuits. So I think it's 150,000 lawsuits now suing Bayer because people believe that Roundup gave them cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And this is now, I think it's $16 billion that have been set aside to deal with this issue, not only from settlements, but then also being proactive in terms of what they're going to do about it. So they recently put in a new CEO, and he had this multi-pronged approach to how they were going to take care of these lawsuits, because what they don't want to do is put any kind of labeling whatsoever on the bottle or on the product label. And it's crazy because actually putting a label, and this was actually recommended by Judge Shabria, who's a federal judge. He said, why don't you just put a label that says some studies have shown a connection to cancer and just be done with it? And they wouldn't do it. And so they are willing to bankrupt themselves before they will put this label on their product. And so what is wild is watching, and this, you can only do this with billions of dollars, frankly, their multi-pronged approach to make sure that glyphosate still stays on the market. And what they're doing is they have launched, and for people who are familiar with vaccines became a real issue when a vaccine liability shield was passed, so that people who were victims or injured couldn't sue the manufacturers. Well, the chemical companies are looking to do the same thing with pesticides. And so that is what we're dealing with now. And it's unbelievable because this would impact 57,000 different pesticide and chemical products to have full liability. And they've launched it so that they are doing it through state level law. And so that's actually passed in Georgia and North Dakota, where if you get sick from pesticide or chemical exposure, you can no longer sue manufacturers. Then they are trying to do it at the federal level. And this is, they've tried a few times, and this is their most successful attempt yet, where the House Appropriations Spending Bill right now has made it through several committees, and it's going to go to a full House vote in this fall. And effectively what happened is the Republicans came in and they 100% voted through this language with a pesticide liability shield in it. The Democrats opposed it. And it's so awful because Bayer has crafted the wording so incredibly cryptically that even when we go and we talk to the Congress people about what it is, they say that's not a liability shield, because it takes so much maneuvering to get from like what it says there to how it actually is serving as a liability shield. So there's this sense of disbelief. There's a lot of animosity right now in the anti-pesticide world because of RFK versus people that begrudge, and that has proven to be a perfect opportunity for Bayer to just come in and just dominate, because our troops are broken, and so there is a very, very limited number of people that are there fighting the liability shield now. It's unbelievable. So that is what's coming up in the fall, like in September. On top of that, now the cases, one of the cases has now been appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court, one of the cancer cases. And so they have sent a request over to the White House. The Supreme Court has asked the White House if they should hear this case, basically whether or not the EPA has the ultimate say on whether a chemical is safe or not. So should we even be able to sue if the EPA says that something's safe? And Biden, they tried this during Biden's administration, and they very quickly said, don't hear the case. This has not been commented on yet. And it's unclear whether or not the Supreme Court is going to be allowed to hear the case. And there's been all this pressure going into Trump, like through every avenue we have, and still nothing's been done. So that's super disappointing. Bobby RFK Jr. had to recuse himself from this whole issue because he was one of the attorneys that fought Monsanto. And so to take that position, he's not allowed to get involved. So I am looking at this every day, and it's so distressing because if this passes in any of these forms. Oh, and then the last way actually is the EPA also was recently taking comments to see whether or not their labels should preempt any state level labels. So if California puts something that's like, oh, we're concerned about this, then if the EPA says, oh, we're not, then that would dominate the land. So we are looking at such an enormous, unprecedented crisis with our chemical exposure with this. And it's just been extremely hard because influencers aren't paying attention. Really, people that should care. I don't know who wants them to have this liability shield, and our ability to make it loud is just keeps on being quelled because, of course, once again, mainstream media is funded by Bayer and these agricultural chemicals. So it's a really frustrating time right now with the movement. And it's like, we just feel like we need some sort of like godly intervention to take care of this because it's really not looking good.
The similarity between the argument of the people who are anti-vax or whatever, fragmenting their group over this because of RFK, risking allowing this to happen just boggles my mind. I
cannot wrap my head around that. And it's to the point where I think some people actually might like to see this pass through, just they can say, see, we told you don't vote for Trump. It shows where, because in my case, I don't care who does it. I don't want glyphosate and pesticides in my life.
Yeah.
Because that's my priority. So to see partisanship around this issue that is really just going to completely sacrifice our ability to even have children is just disgusting.
I call them the follow the science people.
Yes.
You know, we hear this follow the science stuff all the time. And I'm like, great, let's update the science. Because how old are those studies? And so nobody wants to revisit this. I mean, we've revisited lots of things. Why is it an issue to revisit science that is however old? And here's a perfect case in point. If you look at cholesterol, like we look at cholesterol all the time, I forget how old cholesterol, total cholesterol, LDL, VLDL, triglycerides. How old is that? That's a 1940s, 50s test. I don't know. It's old. It's outdated. Mm-hmm. And how many scientists say that the discordance between cholesterol and cardiovascular disease is so great. And so now what do we have? We now have a new test. We have a test called an NMR. And this starts to fractionate out the lipids. And there's concordance with this. We're not gods, people. If we do something once, it's not written in stone. If that was the case, you know what? We just have glyphosate because Mother Nature couldn't do anything about it. So if there is a plea that I'm making to the public, because Kelly gets it, I get it. Revisit this, because even if you think that it doesn't affect you, it's going to affect someone in your family some point in time, whether it's your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren. Don't wish this on those guys. And that's exactly what we're doing. How can people help? You know, you've touched on this liability shield, which is just absolutely sickening to me, but you've touched on that. What about, how can we, since RFK has recused himself, how do we help? How does anybody listening to this jump into the fray and really help?
The things that you can do, particularly if you are in a Republican district, the very best thing that you can do is go and call your congressperson and say that you do not support any language in any bill that would potentially give protection to chemical manufacturers. In this case, ChemChina, Bayer, Corteva are the main ones. And just think about that. ChemChina and Bayer are both foreign. And so they can sell us whatever junk. It might not even be what's on the label, and we still can't sue. And that was a really good point you just made about it may not impact you personally. You also might not know that it's impacting you personally because the EPA bases all of their evaluations on industry provided research. They don't have a lab there where they're testing things themselves. They trust what science is given to them, and then they regulate based on that. And if there's independent research that is unfortunate or contradictory to being able to sell a pesticide, then they say that they're not going to look at that research. So we're not dealing with honesty.
Yeah. We do not have full disclosure. This is like going to your doctor and he starts to treat you without full consent. That's not supposed to happen. Your doctor is supposed to actually explain everything to you, what's good and what's bad, how it can affect you, and how you can benefit from it. And then you're supposed to make an educated decision. That's called informed consent. We don't have it with the marketing that is out there.
Exactly. We don't have it. That's so well said. And so what you can do is I've set up actually a website. You can go to stoppoison.org and there's a sign up form. You can go there and sign up. And then when we have our calls to action this fall, so in September, when Congress is back, I will email you and I will tell you exactly what the call to action is so that we can get going and educate the Congress people and hopefully threaten them, because this is what we have at play right now is that most of them, actually maybe, yeah, I think all the people that we're looking to target are going to be up for a re-election in 2026. So this is the midterm elections. The Republicans stand to not hold the House and the Senate, actually, if we don't want them to. And Maha and this health-oriented conservative group in general has really showed to be a deciding factor in the election of President Trump. So we still hold that. The Republicans don't understand, by and large, the traditional Republicans who aren't necessarily pro-health don't seem to wrap their mind very easily around the fact that this Kennedy momentum is real and it has numbers. And so they're not being particularly responsive right now, and they will need to be, because it will be a deciding factor. Believe it or not, their constituents don't really want to be poisoned. It's so funny because they think they don't care. Oh, they care. I talk to them all the time. They very much care. And a lot of young families that are starting out are really upset that there are chemicals all around their families and that they're sick. And not to mention all the people that are infertile and not able to get pregnant. So the Republicans need to come up to speed on the fact their constituents care.
Don't particularly care for Trump, and I didn't particularly care for Kamala.
Yeah.
I actually backed RFK.
So did I. Yeah.
And then I followed him, hoping he would be able to do things in the administration. So I am neither Democrat nor Republican. And so this comes from somebody who really, I'm a doctor because I care about people's health. I care about my health. My son is getting ready he wants children, and they're actually being you can tell we're nerds because he's gone to the geneticist and he's doing all
this
to make sure he can verify everything that he can. And so think that I missed that you would like to add on to this while we wrap it up, because we are an hour and 20 minutes in.
Just the last thing I think is for people and to realize is that you can start locally. This stuff at the federal level is really, really enormous, but there are things you can do in your local community to make change. And that is, can you get the school to decide to use different land care? Can you just have it so that in public places, they aren't spraying anymore? So there are things that you can do at your town level that will make a really big impact to you and everyone around you. So if it sounds overwhelming when you think about it, and it is overwhelming, I'm overwhelmed. I'm in it every day with just the federal aspect of it and the state level aspect. Your local cities, there's certainly corruption there too, as I've seen my own. But in general, if you can get a small coalition of people together that are willing to go show up at a city council meeting and say, this is what we want, it can really make a big impact.
Well, perfect. Well, go ahead and give us everywhere people can find you, your website, all of that again, one more time, please.
Yes. So you can find me at Glyphosate Girl on Instagram and Twitter. And I'm more active on Instagram than I am on Twitter, on X. And then you can go to glyphosatefacts.com and you can read a lot about the history of glyphosate, the history, all the stuff I was talking about with the launch of GMOs, and then see a lot of research on the human health impacts of glyphosate. And then you can go to americanregeneration.org and see what we're going to do about it.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your time. And if any of you have questions, pop them in here or email her. We are happy to answer questions because ultimately we all are in this same community and our health is interdependent. And we do depend on each other. And we all need to make smarter, better choices. Well, thank you, Kelly. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for taking this time to look into the health of you and your loved ones. This broadcast does not constitute a doctor-patient relationship. It is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not a replacement or substitute for care. If you are having issues, please seek a qualified professional trained in functional medicine. We would be happy to be of assistance with both in-person and virtual consultations. Thank you.
It's in our DNA, and I know people just don't want one more thing to worry about, but at a foundational level, this affects everything. It affects your finances because you're not going to be going to the doctors often if you're not literally poisoned. It affects your health because, once again, at a foundational level, if you're not poisoned, you have good health and you don't have to go see the doctor. It affects, I mean, you could even say it goes into like spirituality and everything else because you're not harming Mother Earth or whatever you want to say. It's one of those root causes. It's a foundational step that people can take to help themselves on so many levels. Mm-hmm. And you touched on all the cancers. I mean, it doesn't just cause the lymphocytic cancers. It's been linked to breast cancer. Go ahead. I'll let you.
Yeah, it's connected to breast cancer. It's connected to, and the breast cancer is through estrogen pathways that are damaged and impacted by glyphosate exposure. Multiple myeloma is another. Leukemia now has been connected to glyphosate exposure. And that's just the beginning. There are all kinds of studies out there that show the mechanism to which carcinogenicity happens from glyphosate exposure, including some mechanisms that is through microbiome impact and what that dysbiosis creates in terms of like an inflammatory environment for things to, go the wrong way. And the reason why the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is the one that's been so amplified is just that the base of research that exists that you could bring to a courtroom and actually have a court case around happens to be the largest with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So in the same way, paraquat and Parkinson's are also very closely tied. And so there's that body of research that now can go into court cases and you can say, this is very connected to Parkinson's. I was exposed. But once again, that will be taken away with this liability shield. You wouldn't be able to say you gave me Parkinson's. You would not be able to sue for that.
Yes. And that just, okay. You have mentioned, and when we did our first interview, that there were some people who are doing research. And even if they don't get research from, after doing a little more digging, from the government, there are ways to donate to them. So people who have the ability to write checks and help with this type of research, where can they go?
So there's a really unprecedented and very like the dream pesticide epidemiology study is happening right now. And it's called the group that put it together is the Heartland Health Research Alliance, HHRA. And they are doing the Heartland study where they are taking pairs, so mom and baby pairs, and following through pregnancy all the way through early childhood and documenting what exposures there were, taking urine samples and I believe blood samples as well, and testing to see how that exposure to specific pesticides leads to poor outcomes or what types of diseases. This is the kind of study that doesn't really exist much because it's always so expensive to pull off a study in people. Doing rodent studies is also actually very expensive, but this is like a lot to get all these mother-child pairs in regularly with all the surveys and everything. And so that is something that I would hope that the government would fund. So far, they have not, but I know that they are. I mean, the ability to help fund that would make a really huge difference. And I can give you, once again, it's the Heartland Health Research Alliance, HHRA, the Heartland study. And yeah, they're looking in the heartland in the Midwest, where people are much more directly impacted by spray drift and just regular sprays in their small communities.
I'll ask you to actually, if you wouldn't mind, sending me that in an email and anything that you think helps this, because I will put it in the description for you folks. And then that, you guys can follow up and you guys can read up on it. Quickly, we touched on it last time, but I want to just go a little more. What are some keywords for people to search for in PubMed? Because we want people, go do your own research. Don't take our words for it. Go do your research. Go to PubMed. What are great words for them to search for in PubMed? Yes,
go to PubMed and convince yourself, because that's what we all do. Like, oh no. Because part of the problem is we're just reliant on what the media reports. So we have to go and see ourselves. And if you go to PubMed and you put in glyphosate cancer, okay, then you'll get a bunch of things on the different mechanisms, the different types of cancer. Some studies showing that they didn't find anything, some showing that they do, and just look and see what the sort of the weight of the evidence is telling you in terms of even like quantity of studies and what way are they pointing. And you can have no scientific background and still go in and you can read the abstract, and there'll be just even a small, there's like usually a short paragraph at the beginning that basically gives the overview of what the study was with like a conclusion that really anyone can understand. So that would be something I would say. Go ahead.
I would add, where can they find who funded the study?
Very important. So on those documents, they have to say who funded the study. So if you go and you see, and so I would go and I'd look, and a lot of times there are names of, organizations. So it might not say Bayer, it might not say Bayer or Monsanto or what have you. It might be something else that is used that sounds very sciencey, that actually is a cover for Bayer. So you need, or whatever the chemical company is. So you can go in and usually plug around and be your own detective, and you can figure out who that corporation is. Now, in the cancer trials, that was a big thing because they had hired these scientists to ghostwrite research on their behalf. So it looked like it was independent, but it absolutely was not. And of course, the conclusion was, oh, it doesn't cause cancer. So that's something definitely to keep in mind, particularly if it's a study that shows that there was no impact. And so that same thing, going in and saying glyphosate endocrine disruption, glyphosate estrogen, glyphosate testosterone, glyphosate ovaries, all of these things, autoimmunity. Those are really good places to start, and you will see just this enormous quantity of research. And a lot of times these studies also will include other like pesticides that are used a lot. So things like 2,4-D, sometimes glyphosate is in there, which is one that's coming out strong, unfortunately, because they got to keep on creating ways to kill the weeds. So, never ending product line.
That way you get to keep your patent too, because you just change it a little bit and then all of a sudden your patent is miraculously extended.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Works for medicine too.
Terrible.
You were doing a lot of research on the second, when they were spraying crops right before they were going to desiccate them, antifungal, blah. How have you been doing on your research into either eliminating that? You mentioned that earlier. It was only like 3%. Mm-hmm. Where are you at with that?
So Right now, I am trying to influence the government to be adopting the practices that could eliminate the pre-harvest desiccation that I was talking about earlier. So that's where the farmer comes in and sprays. It might be paraquat, it might be diquat. It's usually glyphosate to dry out the whole field that they want to harvest so that it dries evenly, and kill it off at one time, and then go in and harvest it. And then all those residues, those pesticide residues, still end up on the food, and then we eat it. So that's a big practice. It's anywhere from 80 to 90% of our dietary exposure is from that practice. And it's one that has only been around, for like 2 decades now. And so getting rid of that should be so easy. And I think it can be if the farmers just have a little support to do it. So mechanical drying is something that we're looking into with our farmers that already do it. And that is basically a big dryer that you can put your wet, you can harvest when you feel that it's time. And if it's damp, the concern would be, well, there might be some sort of fungal growth that would make it unsellable. So instead, putting it into this dryer, drying it so that fungal outbreak isn't as likely or won't happen, and then being able to sell it. So that mechanical investment is something that the USDA certainly has money for, and it's just about convincing them that would be a good thing to do. It can be some of these smaller dryers for smaller farms can be like $10,000 to $15,000, and so that's something that a lot of people can manage. But certainly being able to subsidize that seems like a good idea. Another idea that we're tossing around is having some of the grain elevators work in collaboration, because they would have that drying capacity. So bringing them there, letting them do the drying, and paying them directly instead for that service. So that's something that there are a lot of people in HHS that are really interested in doing. And it's just like, can we get USDA to care? So that's where we are right now.
All right. Well, unfortunately, there's been a lot of negativity with everything that we're talking about. Let's start to turn the ship a little bit. So with Gabe Brown and the guys that are doing the regenerative farming, what does their profitability look like?
Well, there are all kinds of different numbers. In general, the farmers are seeing, when they started to adopt these regenerative practices, things like cover cropping, stopping the monocrop, so they have crop rotation. Rotational grazing is another aspect of it, and growing and understanding the context. So not growing crops that really don't belong in that geography. So if you start adopting these various practices, usually like the upfront investment, you get payback on in 15 to, or anywhere from 15 to 25% of that investment. What's that?
Is that like year one?
That's over time. I think that's over a span of 3 years.
I was going to say, because from the things that I have read, it was like 3 to 5 years, but still So for my farmers, we're in Indiana and there's a lot of them. So for my farmers, I don't know of any farmer that is telling me he's profitable year over year.
Mm-hmm.
So that means every year the margins are getting tighter and tighter. If in 3 to 5 years you can sit here and start to say that you're anywhere from 10 to 25% profitable, and you maintain that just because of inflation, or how the Monsantos and Kim Chinas and those guys are going to keep squeezing your profits, you now get to keep them.
That's right, because when you are starting to restore your soil health, and this is the thing that's like so amazing. I'm glad you're saying turning the tides, and we're bringing this to DC because I don't think farmers understand that and actually, frankly, a lot of policymakers understand that there is this miraculous off ramp here from this current chemical system where you're enslaved to the companies and to government subsidies. There is an off ramp, and it works, and it's so amazing. And I'm not talking like, oh, you go organic. It's not that. It is restoring the ecosystems so that you can have a profitable crop and stop spending so much money on these inputs that you don't even want to be spraying. Like, it's not like farmers like, great, I'm going to go spend money to go spray these toxins. That's great. You know?
Well, and for the politicians, that money leaves the country.
Mm-hmm.
That money's not staying here. It gets taxed once when you buy it, they're getting their sales tax, whatever. But after that, the money leaves. It just doesn't make sense on any level. You're really sacrificing future gains for a short-term profit that's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, if you can even call it profit, because the only person profiting are the companies.
Well, I mean, and it's so horrible because you also have the mental health strain. Farmers are 5 times more likely to commit suicide than average. And that is that incredible strain of stress of those profit margins being so small, and worrying that your crop is going to fail that year. And I mean, the whole system is not set up to be a very pleasant experience for farmers who are stuck in this situation. And a lot of times they have to have second jobs even to make ends meet for them personally. So, and I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out there among people that think that like farmers are happily spraying this and that, they don't care. And that's just not true at all. And it's frustrating to hear that. But like, I would encourage people to talk to farmers, and particularly conventional farmers, to understand what their situation is, because they have been put into this position just by the way subsidies have been done and just allowing the chemical companies to own them.
What was it? I forget whose administration it was, but was it Earl Butz that came out and said, go big or go home? And that started the spiral. So
yeah, and our small farms then disappeared. I mean, just terrible. The small family farms that were the basis of our country disappeared.
And then if you look back at the Dust Bowl, we were cultivating with tractors. It killed all the topsoil. We're just doing that now chemically. The difference is we're not using John Deere to do it. We're using 2,4-D, and we're doing the same thing, folks. So your website, and now you have several websites. Everybody should go to I want to say InfoFacts. I'm stuck.
Glyphosatefacts.com. Yes.
Glyphosatefacts.com. You also have American Regeneration.
That's right. AmericanRegeneration.org. And that is I co-founded with Ryland Engelhart, who founded Kiss the Ground. And we have put together this group with just these, our advisors are all of the top regenerative farmers. And we just feel very proud and excited that they want to collaborate with us. And so we look to them. We're working on a lot of policy recommendations and doing field days and really trying to spread the gospel of regeneration. And so we recently founded just a few months ago, American Regeneration, and that's what we're doing there. And we feel really excited about it. So you can go there and you can see a short clip of just the miracle. It shows Gabe Brown and Rick Clark and what they've done on their farms. It's just a short clip of the film Common Ground, and how Rick Clark in Indiana was able to convert his 10,000 acres to being regenerative. He no longer sprays chemicals. He no longer has to take subsidies. It's been a complete game changer, and his profitability has gone way up. So he's one of the co-founders of American Regeneration, and he just wants to share with people, you can do it if you have the right instruction. So it's like that hand-holding to understand how you'd even start.
Well, and I got all kinds of little notes. I'm going to try to put a lot of this in the description to make it easy for you guys to go click and watch your documentary, which is not Kiss the Ground. Your documentary is
Common Ground.
Yes, your documentary is Common Ground. Then there's Kiss the Ground, and then I want to put in your links to your websites. How do you blend the perspectives of economics and your health coaching? How do you blend these perspectives to tackle glyphosate and bring people to, it's not all doom and gloom. There are things we can do. How do you blend those together? How do you pull that together for people?
Well, my feeling is that while I am glyphosate girl and I do glyphosate facts, I'm very worried about glyphosate. I also just as a person, I have a belief that we are extremely resilient, and that if we can take the right steps to protect ourselves, that we are going to be able to overcome this chemical era, which I think is showing the signs of needing to depart immediately. And I think we're beginning it. And I think this movement with RFK Jr. just is the very beginning of it. And so I have hope around that. I think in terms of the economics of the reality of the situation, I am not for a glyphosate ban because I think that would be devastating to the farmers. And right now the farmers are panicking because the attorney that sued Monsanto is suddenly in this powerful position and has Trump's ear. And they are freaking out that they are going to lose their farm, because if they can't spray glyphosate, they are not going to have a crop. And that's the truth right now. That's where they are, and they won't, because the soil is so sick that it can't sustain itself. It can't fight. It's like it just has such poor immunity. It can't fight these different kinds of insults and pests. And so right now it's fully dependent, just like people become dependent on drugs to function. It's not really very different. And the soil is very sick. And so people that come and say you have to stop spraying all glyphosate tomorrow, they're concerns with that also, because as we saw when Bayer recently came in and replaced the Roundup product, so took the glyphosate out and then put worse things in that are just terrible for us, and made it 40 times more toxic. That's really a problem that we could see on the farm too. So the idea is, if you can put enough and really trust that enough people want to make this change, and put the financial incentives in play from the government level so that these changes are adopted, and you can take a step off of the synthetic fertilizers because suddenly your soil's healthy and fertile. This is regenerative agriculture. That is where the economic answer lies, as well as the ethical answer and the ecosystems.
So that made me think about the Farm Bill, because the Farm Bill is just this huge, monstrous thing. How much of that, because I know not a lot of that actually goes to the farmers. What do you think the possibility of actually redirecting some of this stuff that goes elsewhere into whatever, getting that to the farmer? I mean, that's how many $1 trillion is the bill? While you answer, I'll look that up.
Yeah, look that it. So, gosh, we're so frustrated. There's supposedly, so the House Ag Committee is very, very keen to pass a skinny farm bill this fall, and that would be just the bare bones of some policy that needs to be put through to support farmers. And actually, I just went last week, I went and I met with a member of the Ag Committee, his Ag staffer, and he's from North Carolina, from the High Point area. And that happens to be where my mother-in-law and father-in-law both died early from pesticide exposure. And people in their small town get sick all the time and die early because it's former farmland and they still spray things. And it was unbelievable because there's no give at all. It is an area where there's a lot of hog farming. Smithfield is there. And, he proudly boasted how many pigs are slaughtered, in the factories daily. And there was no acknowledgement at all that there was any kind of problem. And I don't think any belief that there was any kind of problem. And these are the same people that right now are going to be dictating what is in that farm bill and whether or not it will pass. And so I don't know what it's going to take to convince those people that this isn't the way forward. I have more hope in being able to convince Brooke Rollins, head of the USDA, that money needs to be put towards regenerative practices than I do with the Congress doing the right thing on the farm bill and actually shifting some priority to less chemical use. And so that, and I think that I don't even know that that's direct pressure from, it probably is to a certain extent from the chemical companies, but I think that is the constituents that are dependent and very, very loud, and they don't want to see any change. And so that's where that pressure is coming from.
The Farm Bill, when
it was done was supposed to be about $428 billion over its 5-year lifespan. And it has now become a $1.5 trillion monstrosity.
Gosh.
But that includes things like SNAP benefits. Somehow SNAP benefits have gotten into the Farm Bill.
Yeah.
People, if there's one way we could put pressure on politicians, let's get line item vetoes, term limits, and you should be able to be hung up by your toenails if you introduce an abortion rider into an energy bill. Those, you should be flogged publicly for that. That is a game, and it just isn't right. Take your licks and move on, Mr. Politician, because that's crazy. It just bugs me to no end. But anyway, so I've taken a lot of your time, and sorry Jessica wasn't here to finish the last part of it because she really gets passionate about, people and how we make people healthy and how we can help them. Think that I missed that you would like to add on to this while we wrap it up, because we are an hour and 20 minutes in.
Just the last thing I think is for people and to realize is that you can start locally. This stuff at the federal level is really, really enormous, but there are things you can do in your local community to make change. And that is, can you get the school to decide to use different land care? Can you just have it so that in public places, they aren't spraying anymore? So there are things that you can do at your town level that will make a really big impact to you and everyone around you. So if it sounds overwhelming when you think about it, and it is overwhelming, I'm overwhelmed. I'm in it every day with just the federal aspect of it and the state level aspect. Your local cities, there's certainly corruption there too, as I've seen my own. But in general, if you can get a small coalition of people together that are willing to go show up at a city council meeting and say, this is what we want, it can really make a big impact.
Well, perfect. Well, go ahead and give us everywhere people can find you, your website, all of that. Again, one more time, please.
Yes. So you can find me at Glyphosate Girl on Instagram and Twitter. And I'm more active on Instagram than I am on Twitter, on X. And then you can go to glyphosatefacts.com and you can read a lot about the history of glyphosate, the history, all the stuff I was talking about with the launch of GMOs, and then see a lot of research on the human health impacts of glyphosate. And then you can go to americanregeneration.org and see what we're going to do about it.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your time. And if any of you have questions, pop them in here or email her. We are happy to answer questions, because ultimately we all are in this same community and our health is interdependent. And we do depend on each other. And we all need to make smarter, better choices. Well, thank you, Kelly. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for taking this time to look into the health of you and your loved ones. This broadcast does not constitute a doctor-patient relationship. It is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not a replacement or substitute for care. If you are having issues, please seek a qualified professional trained in functional medicine. We would be happy to be of assistance with both in-person and virtual consultations. Thank you.